Hi everyone, it's White Cross, and this is the video some of you have been waiting for. This is our first video on gold, and we're calling this series the Basics of Bullion. This is Basics of Bullion Volume 1, and if you are new to the channel, I appreciate you being here with me. I hope that you'll consider subscribing to the channel so you can learn about Basics of Bullion 2 and all the forthcoming videos that involve gold. We still have a lot of ground to cover with silver as well. If you are a returning subscriber, I genuinely appreciate you spending some time with me here again today. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad that you're finding this information that I'm putting out useful. Basics of Bullion Volume 1. So this video series is really designed for people who are new to the concept of gold bullion. So this is for people who maybe have never bought gold before, maybe have never even really seen gold bullion before. You're the people that I'm making this video for. If you are an old timer and you've got plenty of gold, or if you are even just an intermediate buyer of gold and you've got some experience, then this video may be helpful for you. I always feel like it's a good idea to get another perspective, especially when you're talking about things like physical bullion. But that's not really what this video series is designed for. So you guys may want to skip this and hold on for the intermediate or even the advanced gold bullion videos. Love to have you stay and watch the video. In fact, that's one thing that I wanted to talk about before we get into the content of this video. As always, I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience as I've been buying and selling gold and silver bullion and coins for the last 30 or 40 years, coins even a little bit longer than that. So I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This is just experience and giving you a little bit more knowledge. And on a personal note, this is my first video on gold, and I do believe that there are pitfalls that are part and parcel with the concept of physical gold. If you are not interested in learning a little bit more about gold before you start making purchases, even if it's watching a few videos like this, and again, I do appreciate you being with me here today, if you're not participating in some online forums, and I'll leave some links down below to some of the forums that currently have a pretty good population of people talking about physical precious metals. If you're not interested in learning the basics, I personally feel that gold may not be the right vehicle for you. Now, there are pitfalls with gold. There are some positives and negatives with gold. And there are lots and lots of vehicles for putting your money into if you just don't think that you've got the interest, or you don't have the capacity, if you don't have the time to learn a little bit about it. I totally understand that. But I do feel personally that gold requires a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of experience before you really get into it. So if you don't want to spend some time learning a little bit about it, you may want to consider other options instead. So again, this video series is going to be quite slow. I'm going to take it very easily for all of you beginners out there. Sit back and just learn a little bit. That's my entire goal of this introductory series. This video is called Basics of Bullion 1, What Makes Gold Gold? And we're going to start at the very beginning. For me, in my understanding of gold and what makes it appealing to me is really down to two different areas. The first one is gold's physical properties, and the second one is gold's human properties, how human beings interact with it. So again, we're going to start slow and we're going to learn a little bit about gold, and you're going to learn why I feel gold has got some interaction with human beings going back thousands of years, and kind of explain why that is. So the physical properties of gold. What is gold? Gold, in its simplest form, is an element. It's a metal and it's an element. What is an element? An element is one of the 118 substances in our known universe that builds everything else. So pure gold cannot be broken down into anything but pure gold. It is an element. Silver is another element. Iron is another element. Those are all metallic elements. Copper is an element. Gold is an element. And unlike some other kinds of compounds that we make with elements, gold is usually in bullion form pure or quite pure. Now, the next several videos that I'll be making, I'll be talking about the purities of gold, and I'll be talking about the weights and measures of gold. But for this one, we're just talking about some of the physical properties. This is a knife, and this knife is steel. Steel is not an element. Steel is made out of 2 or sometimes even 3 other elements, and sometimes even more than that. Mostly it's iron. Iron is an element. Steel is also made out of carbon, and in most cases it's got some chromium in it too. Those are 3 different elements. So you can break steel down, you can refine steel down to its 3 elements if you wanted to, if you had the time and the expense. Break it down into iron, break it down into carbon, and the chromium also. So iron is an element, gold is an element. Steel is a compound made of elements. Gold is very heavy, somewhat like iron, but gold is very dense. In fact, it is the 8th most dense element that we know of. What does that mean? That means to the human hand, to our human bodies, gold is quite heavy. We perceive it as being quite heavy. That's an important factor later on. And gold is also malleable. Malleable just means that it bends without breaking. In fact, pure gold can be hammered so thin that it can be the thickness of a micron or even less. A micron is 1/10,000th of a centimeter. For all you kids watching this video for your report on elements, 1/10,000th of a centimeter is a micron. Gold can be hammered even thinner than a micron. Gold is so malleable that a 1 ounce of gold, and this is 1 ounce of gold with a little bit of other metals mixed in, and again, we'll talk about that later, but this contains 1 ounce of gold. 1 ounce of gold can be drawn into a wire 50 miles long without breaking. So that's its malleability. Gold is also a noble metal. And what we mean by that is that it's just not, it resists chemical reactions. It also is impervious to water, including salt water. It doesn't corrode easily. This is a sterling silver bowl, and you can see that this bowl, even though I had polished it not too long ago, has already started to tarnish. That's that darker color. That's silver interacting with oxygen, and it makes tarnish. Gold doesn't really do that. It is almost impervious to chemical reactions, or at least it resists chemical reactions. Oxygen reacting with it is what made the silver dark. It doesn't really do that with gold. Gold is even slow to react to acids, and it isn't affected by many acids. So it's impervious to water, including salt water. It doesn't really react with acids, at least most acids. It doesn't react with oxygen in the air. Gold is a noble metal. It's also a fantastic conductor. Now, it's not the greatest conductor. Silver is actually better and copper is actually better. But because gold is resistant to those chemical reactions, gold can be used in environments where silver or copper corrode or degrade too quickly. Deep sea, outer space, miniature, things like cell phones. So gold is useful because it's a conductor, but also because it doesn't react to chemicals very easily. So those are some of the physical properties of gold. How does that play into the human scale? What are the human properties? And I like to think of gold as kind of the perfect storm element, or if you want to, the Goldilocks of elements. And let me go over a few of those factors, kind of like the physical properties of gold, but what that means in terms of humanity. So it's rare. We know that gold is rare, right? You probably understand that concept, but I mean globally. Gold is rare. Gold can be found in many different locations around the world. It can be found in Australia. It can be found in North and Central America, South America. It's found in Canada. It's found in Eastern Europe and Russia, obviously in South Africa. So it is distributed globally, but it's typically very rare globally as well. Now, there are exceptions, and there have been exceptions in history. There have been some places in history where large deposits of gold have been found that have been easy to find by human beings, but that is actually quite unusual for that to happen. So its distribution is such that even globally, it's usually only found in relatively small amounts. And because of that, gold is a good surrogate for labor. So without going into too much economics here, gold is a physical representation of the cost and the effort that it takes to find it. For example, I've got friends who do hobby mining and they've got a nice sluice and they've actually got a claim on a really beautiful stream. And they are able to, several times a year, go sluicing for gold. Now, a sluice is kind of like a metal slide that water runs down, and they literally shovel up the gravel in the base of this stream where they have their claim, and they deposit the gravel at the top of the sluice, and gravity, because of the density of gold, recall that we talked about that earlier, pulls gold down while other debris and water and other material passes over that sluice. So the gold is trapped down in the bottom of the sluice in riffles, and then it's very carefully picked out, or in their case, they shake out the riffles and they find the small amount of gold that's there. This is a lot of fun if you all like being out in the outdoors and you love gold as much as I do, but it's also very difficult work, and it has been throughout history. Humans have used kind of the same techniques for thousands of years to find those alluvial deposits of gold. That's gold pretty near the surface. A typical day of hobby sluicing, and I'm kind of reluctant to call it hobby because I've seen how much effort it takes to do it, but a typical day of 8 or 10 hours of sluicing for my friends results in maybe a gram or 2 grams of gold. And again, we'll talk about weights and measures in the next video or one of the other videos in this series, but that's a very small amount of gold. But that small amount of gold represents that 8 or 10 hours of effort that these people put into it, and that seems to be kind of consistent throughout the world and throughout history. If we're talking about the amount of gold, this is a really nice example of it. This is, for all of you stackers out there will immediately recognize it, this is a Mexican 2 peso. This is a coin that's dated 1945, although it was probably made a little bit later and backdated with that 1945 date. We call that a restrike, and we will definitely talk about that later on in gold. But for our purposes here, you can see this is a very small gold coin about the size of my fingernail, quite thin, but it weighs right about 1.5 grams in weight. So if a typical day of sluicing, a good productive day of sluicing, produces about this much gold, and gold currently sells for about $60 a gram, again, we'll touch on weights a little bit later, then this represents somewhere around $150 worth of gold. So all day long, 10-hour day, $150 worth of gold, roughly $15 an hour. You can see how that kind of equates with our minimum wage in the United States as it's been for several years. So that is about a day's worth of work. That is a surrogate for labor. You could take this gold throughout history and exchange your 8 or 10 or 12-hour days worth of panning and mining for gold, and you could exchange it for somebody else's 8 or 10 or 12-hour days worth of whatever it is that they did that you need. So from shearing a sheep and spinning yarn and making clothes, you could exchange your labor's worth of gold for their labor's worth of cloth or clothes. And that kind of exchange happened when people started exchanging gold as a medium of exchange. Before that, we bartered things. We'll talk a little bit about the dawn of coinage in some more advanced videos, but you get the idea that this was a good representation of labor. People were willing to accept your 10-hour day worth of sluicing for their 10-hour day of spinning yarn and somebody else's 10-hour day of raising chickens or eggs or whatever else it is that they wanted to exchange their gold for once you exchanged it with them. So this is a great medium of exchange. How long have we been doing this medium of exchange? Again, A Mexican 2 peso gold coin made sometime in the 20th century at about 1.5 grams of gold. Compare that to this coin. Now it's a little bit chunkier. You can see it's a little bit thicker, but it's still quite heavier. This also is a gold coin that weighs about 1.5 grams. But this gold coin dates from about 600 BCE. This is a 2,500-year-old gold coin from the area of Anatolia, Asia Minor. We would probably refer to it as Western Turkey. So this is a very, very early gold coin. And you can see it's still the same weight, essentially, as the Mexican 2 peso. That is our next item of human properties for gold, and it's that human scale. When we talked about iron a little bit, when we talked about this knife, iron is a commodity that's traded on the exchanges globally, the same way that orange juice is traded, the same way that gold and silver are traded. They're commodities. But iron is about $150 per ton. So roughly the same amount of money as these two small gold coins, but it's for a ton of iron. Imagine trying to exchange iron for goods and services. You would need such an enormous amount, such a heavy weight of iron, that it comes out of that human scale. It becomes that much more unrealistic to use it as a form of exchange. Clearly, iron is very valuable in human history. It's valuable to this day. But it doesn't really make sense as a human scale medium of exchange. If we took a look at something like a diamond, one day's worth of a diamond would be so small that it would be impractical to have that in your pocket, to hold it in your hand, to use it in exchange. So on one hand, you've got the tiny little sliver of a diamond representing a day's wages. And on the other hand, you have literally a ton or maybe 2 tons of iron representing a day's wages. Both of them are impractical. Gold seems to be just about the perfect amount of size where it's something that makes sense to us as human beings, fits in our hand, fits in our pocket. Gold, obviously, therefore, is portable compared to things like iron, but it's also portable when it comes to things that have value, considerable value. Compare it, for example, to a nice antique wardrobe or a beautiful painting. Those items are portable, but not in the same way that something like gold is. Other things of value, like currency, like paper money, has lost its value over time. And I put some examples here of some paper money, and we might do some comparisons later on in the more advanced videos, but here in America, we are used to our currency maintaining its value or some fraction of its value over time, and that's true, it has. But in many countries, in fact, probably most countries of the world, at some point or another, currency, paper money that had been valuable and worth something, and something that people had their life savings in, has been devalued to the point where it has zero value, maybe a little bit of collector value, but none of that exchange value the way that gold seems to. So unlike some of these other vehicles of investment, whether it's stock certificates in companies that have gone bankrupt, money that's been issued by governments that are no longer in effect, not only is gold rare, a surrogate for labor, human in scale, an ideal form of exchange, a medium of exchange, it's also portable and it also lasts, unlike all of these other types of investments. Now, some investments do last. Some other forms of wealth maintain their wealth, not just in your lifetime, but in your kids' lifetimes and your grandkids and your great-grandkids. That's that multi-generational wealth. But many things don't last multi-generations, and we know for a fact that gold has lasted not just a few generations, but literally thousands of years. It has been valued, store of wealth, and used as a medium of exchange for literally thousands of years. And this small Ionian piece is a great example of that. It still maintains its value 2,500 years after it was first pulled from the streams of Western Turkey and hammered into this crude coin. So it lasts. And finally, gold is pretty. And it's not just pretty to me, although I do believe that gold is very attractive. Gold has been thought to be pretty by cultures around the globe throughout human history, going back thousands and thousands of years. All of the different physical properties and most of the other human properties that we've talked about in this video add to that allure for gold. Cultures around the world, no matter where they are, seem to have valued gold in very much the same way. And going back to that portability, if you were in a dangerous situation and you had to move your wealth quickly on your person, you could, throughout most of history, take your wealth with you and have it exchanged wherever you went in the world, if not for the same amount of wealth, then probably a pretty close amount, and in some circumstances, maybe even more wealth. It's a very unusual thing for all of the different factors that I talked about. It's attractive, it lasts, it's portable, it's an ideal medium of exchange in a lot of ways. It's very human in scale. It doesn't take a lot, but it takes enough that we can see it, feel it, heft it. And it's rare, and it's a great surrogate for labor. And all of the other different things that I talked about on the physical property side, it's the fact that it's an element that is dense, that's malleable, that's noble. All of those things make it attractive on a physical scale as well as that human scale. So a brief introduction to just some of the reasons that humans throughout history have felt that gold is something that had value. All of those things added together have explained why, in some part, gold has been desired throughout human history. There is no way to predict the future. No matter who says they can predict the future, I don't believe them. But going on the past history of gold and all of its attributes, especially those physical attributes that we talked about, it seems very likely that gold will continue to maintain its value in some form to human beings far into the future. And I have a hard time trying to find another store of wealth that has that capability and that history the same way that gold does. Past is no indicator of present of future results, but it seems likely that gold will continue to be desired and valued by human beings far into the future. So a basic introduction to gold. If you've never seen it before, now you've seen it, and now you've actually seen me pick it up and hold it in my hands. We will be talking about all of this in much greater detail in the future volumes of this Basics of Bullion series. And then we will take it a little bit deeper and do intermediate videos on gold as well as advanced videos on gold. If you have any questions about any of the topics that I talked about, the physical properties or those human properties, by all means, leave a comment down below. I'd be happy to try to respond to them if I can. If you have any suggestions about future videos, be it gold or silver or numismatics or anything in these areas, leave a comment down below and I'll see if I've got the inventory and the knowledge that can help in the discourse of those ideas that you have. And once again, if you have found this video to be useful, please subscribe to the channel. It's just one more way that this information gets presented to other people who are looking for it. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.